Hi all, this is going to be a walkthrough of how to install Visual Studio Code and set up the requisite debuggers with GCC. If you go to discussion slides 19 from Algorithm Analysis and Debugging, you can see that there's 4 links here. If you click any of them, it's going to take you to a page like this. In this situation, it's GCC for Windows. Now, if you're working on Linux, WSL, or Clang for macOS, you can click these tutorials as well. They should be very similar. First and foremost, I'm going to go ahead and tell you guys that I'm going to be pausing the video at various occasions just to save time. So I'm going to go ahead and install Visual Studio Code. I'm going to download it for Windows 10. Now that the installer is up, I'm going to go ahead and accept the agreement, click Next, allow it to pick a file path for VSCode, click Next again, and personally I like to check all these boxes: open with code, create desktop item, and register code as an editor. You can do whatever you please with that. I'm going to go ahead and click Next and install. So the installation just finished for VSCode, and as you can see, the next step of this tutorial is to install the C and C++ extension for VSCode. So if I go to VSCode, and if you look down here, there's an extensions tab. I'm going to click that and type in C/C++. This is the extension it is referring to. I've already gone ahead and installed it. You should go ahead and do that as well. Once you have finished installing the C/C++ extension, go back to this tutorial page and click on this MinGW to install MinGW. We're going to download the installer and install it. Now that the installer is up for MinGW, I'm going to go ahead and follow the steps. I'm going to click Next, and it's going to open up the next page. I'm going to click Architecture and change it to x86_64. Now, on this installation folder page, I'm going to go ahead and copy this file. You can do Control-A, Control-C to copy, and I'm going to go ahead and put that file path in a notepad for later reference. And I'm going to go ahead and click Next to start the installation. This will take a few minutes. I'm going to go ahead and pause the video. As the download is happening, go ahead and X out of Visual Studio, and we'll get back to that later. Now that the installation is finished, we're going to go ahead and do step 4 of this tutorial, where we're going to go to Windows bar and click Edit Environment Variables for your account. Edit Environment Variables for your account, and I'm going to go to here. It says to choose the path environment variable and click Edit. Then we're going to go ahead and create a new one. As you can see, it's going to look for a file path. That's the reason why we saved the file path on a notepad. So I'm going to go ahead and copy that and paste it right here. I'm going to click OK and then another OK. This completes step 4 for this tutorial. Now if I want to go ahead and check to make sure that MinGW got installed correctly, I'm going to go ahead and type CMD here. It's going to open up a command prompt. I'm going to follow the instructions here, which say to do G++ -- version to see what version of G++ I have. I have 9.2, and I'm also going to see GDB -- version. If MinGW did not get installed correctly, none of these two will show up that they actually have a version. In this case, it's 7.6.1. Now this tutorial is going to go through making you open up VS Code, creating a Hello World file that they want you to create, and messing around with it a little bit by messing around with the IntelliSense and eventually building it and debugging it. For the purposes of our video, I'm going to go ahead and show you the Visual Studio file that I've created. Go to Visual Studio Code while it's booting up. As you can see, when you open up Visual Studio Code, it says that extensions have been modified on the disk. This is the MinGW installation, so we're going to go ahead and reload the window. Alright, so typically you can go ahead and create a new file, but for our demonstration, I'm going to go ahead and open up a example folder that I've already put in code for. So it's a simple folder with just one file, helloworld.cpp. And this code essentially just prints out the sum of the items in a vector, and this is the pass data vector. I use this code for a debugging video that you will see later on. Now if I go ahead and follow the tutorial, and I want to go ahead and build this code, I need to go here and click Terminal, Configure Default Build Task. Terminal, configure default build task. It's going to open up with in my situation, a bunch of build tasks that I can have. If you go ahead and look here, and remember this file path, MinGW, x86, POSIX with the rev 0, and I go ahead here, you can see this is the last one I have right here. I'm going to go ahead and do the g++ executable for that. That's going to create a tasks.json file. Now this tutorial actually explains what tasks.json is, but essentially it's instructions for VS Code on how to build your program. So when you configure a build task, this is what it creates. It creates a tasks.json file. If I go ahead and follow the tutorial further, if you go further down, it tells you to terminal run build tasks. This is building your code. So or you can do Control-Shift-B. As you can see, the build finished successfully. Now you can go ahead and create a new terminal window right down here. And you can go ahead and see if you can run this code. So if I do /helloworld.exe, let's see if this executable runs. Perfect. This is what this piece of code is supposed to print out. It calls the step into function, which prints out line 17, and then it goes ahead and calculates the sum of this vector, all of its elements, which is 45, and it prints it out right here. So as you can see, we just created a task.json file, which allowed us to build an executable for our program, which we were able to then run. Now, this tutorial, again, explains more about the task.json if you would like to find out more. We are now going to go over the debugging, which is creating a launch.json file, which gives instructions to the VS Code to basically know how to debug your code. So if you go ahead and you go to the run command and you click add configuration, you need to go ahead and add a configuration for how to debug. You pick the C++ GDB LLDB, and we're going to go ahead and pick that same file path for g++.executable. And it's going to create a debugging toolbar up here, and it's going to put your program into debug mode by creating a launch.json file. Now, since I have actually already, I'll show it to you again. So I'm going to stop the debugging mode. If I put a breakpoint here on line 27 and I hit run here, or run start debugging here, I'm going to see that the code gets into debugging mode and it'll stop at this breakpoint. Perfect. So this is basically how you set up the debugging mode, right? You can go ahead and step over, and you can see that the sum of the items gets printed out, and you can mess around with debug mode and continue to finish the execution of the program. Now, again, this tutorial goes over the launch.json file that got created for you. As you can see, there's a .vscode file with those two created, and you have your executable here as well. That's what we have created. This goes in more in depth about what launch.json is, and it goes more in depth what it is pertaining to the hello world file that they want you to build in this tutorial. But basically, if you follow the rest of these instructions with their hello world file, you can go ahead and kind of mess around with the debugger and understand how it works. But as a whole, what we've done in this video is install Visual Studio Code, and with any C++ file that you have, you now have the ability to create a tasks.json file and a launch.json file, which each allow you to build, which each give instructions to build and debug your code respectively. Hopefully this is a helpful tutorial and you were able to successfully use a debugger in Visual Studio Code and be able to compile your code with GCC.